In this video, I'm going to be talking about what is an intermediate certificate authority. In the context of public key infrastructure, an intermediate certificate authority can be one or many certificate authorities that exist between the root certificate authority and the end certificate authority. So what really is an intermediate certificate authority? An intermediate certificate authority is an intermediate certificate authority is just a name given to any number of certificate authorities that play a role in the chain of trust that aren't either the root certificate authority or the end certificate authority. Why do intermediate certificate authorities exist? Intermediate certificate authorities exist and act as middlemen between root certificate authorities and end certificates. All three types of certificate authorities create a chain of trust. The web browser implicitly trusts the root CA certificate. The root CA certificate trusts the intermediate certificate authority certificates. And finally, the intermediate CA certificates trust the end user's SSL certificate. Why is the intermediate certificate authority important? The idea behind the intermediate certificate authorities is to add an extra layer of protection. The higher the level of protection is achieved by not having to use the root certificate authority to issue certificates for end users. Instead, the root certificate authorities mainly issue intermediate certificate authority certificates, and these intermediate certificate authorities create end certificates. So what does that mean? Basically, intermediate certificate authority is a certificate authority that is not the root and is not the end. Okay, it exists in between the middle. There could be one or there could be dozens, but that is what intermediate certificate authority is. Why does it exist? It exists because if there is any security problem or a security mess up that you have, it's the same reason for intermediate certificates themselves, is that if you have it exists as sort of a buffer. You don't want to have a security event with your root certificate, right? You don't want a mess up with your root certificate, right? Because that could mean that your entire company goes down. But if there is a security problem or a security event with an intermediate certificate, then that could mean just a couple dozen, right? A couple dozen, the security for a couple dozen websites is compromised versus a couple million if your root certificate and root certificate authority is compromised. So it acts as an intermediate, it acts as a buffer between hackers and the root certificate authority. So ultimately, an intermediate certificate authority exists strictly to act for security, to protect the root certificate and root certificate authority.